Toro Y Moi, MAHAL album review. Let's chat about it. Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this latest from Chaz Bear, aka Toro Y Moi. You know who we're talking about here. Chaz put himself on the map in a big way in the early days of what would have been the chill wave movement, around the time where I was so neck deep into Washed Out and Neon Indian I was at the point of no return. And I've always thought that his debut, Causes of This, was a really underrated gem of that era. But when it comes to ever since then, with me and Toro Y Moi's music, I have been genuinely all over the place. I mean, his breakthrough album, his follow-up, Underneath the Pine, it's a much more ambitious album. It brings in elements of indie pop and new disco and electronic. And even though it wasn't really what I was into at the time, and I'd rather would have heard Chaz go deeper down the sort of chillwave rabbit hole, it was still a really enjoyable album. But if I was sort of on the fence on Underneath the Pine, you can bet your sweet ass that I was really thrown off by anything in return. I mean, while tracks like Say That are still bangers, most of this album is really one-dimensional. So much so I thought I had really just lost sight of what Chaz was doing as a whole. Now, I will say this, though, while certainly not perfect, I've always really, had a soft spot for his neo-psych and psych pop romp on What For. I mean, Empty Nesters on its own is, good. And for me, I've never really understood, why people don't like Boo Boo. I mean, it is a sharp, steamy, confident dive into the world of alternative R&B. A really good one, too, and if you don't like Girl Like You, you're lying to yourself. But when it came to his last album, Outer Peace, in 2019, I shrugged through most of it. Certainly there's some great material on there, but it wasn't a big artistic leap for me. Now, speaking of big artistic leaps, listening to these new singles, it was very clear that Chaz had some real tricks up his sleeve on this album, for better and for worse. Let's chat about it. I mean, let's cut to the chase right away. This is far from where we've ever been with Chaz. I mean, yes, he's toyed with neo-psych and psych pop, but this is a straight-up psychedelic soul record, and it starts off with a banger. Yeah, the medium featuring Unknown Mortal Orchestra is just the perfect place for this album to start. It absolutely rips right off the bat. This is straight, coherent thought done well. It's all fueled by this big, bulky psych rock riff from Unknown Mortal Orchestra. They sound great. That, alongside a very hazy instrumental and some stellar production, this is awesome. And it's just so simple, too. This is a very big leap for Chaz, this album, but let me tell you something. When he got his head in the game, when he really does have his head in the game, honestly, he's actually putting out some magic. Goes By So Fast is one of my favorite tracks here. This track is so syrupy and sweet. It's a great medium for Chaz. Yes, it's a little drawn out, but I think that's a big plus here. And Chaz just really gets it on this track. It is equal parts really sweet on the ears, maybe just catchy enough, but it's also really out there, man. I love the production. We get some slick instrumentals. The woodwinds are really nice, too. This is great. Magazine is really good as well. This actually, has grown on me a lot. I wasn't really feeling it when it first dropped as a single. I mean, in that case, I kind of think that the overall shift in sound just caught me off guard. Because it is a big leap, but this track is so intoxicating and carefree and sweet. It's the perfect sound for the change of the seasons, and Chaz doesn't sound lost either. No, he sounds right at home. There's quite a bit about this album that's done very well. Last Year is really nice too. It's the sort of sunny, hazy psychedelic pop that I've always gravitated towards. It's very influenced by the sounds of the late 60s. He does it justice though. The waves of incredibly hazy production, the very jazzy, free-spirited feel to this all. This is what Chaz should aim for the whole thing. Mississippi is really awesome as well. I love how bluesy and soulful this comes off. I mean, I didn't know Chaz had this in them. This sounds like a Toro Y Moi track, but like a classic Toro Y Moi track, but one that was left out in the sun for way too long. But I think that's really cool. I like the soulful licks here, the syrupy vibe to everything. And once again, it's a complete thought. My main issue with this album, though, is those complete thoughts, because there's some tracks on here that are far from that. Postman, oh god, I want to love it so much. And there's parts of it that are certainly fun, and it's certainly funky, but it's just a little too cheesy for me. And some of y'all love your funk that way. I get it. But for me, this track is one of the more boring and tame ones here, and Chaz's performance really doesn't live up to this very, fun instrumental. The loop is even less my speed, but for different reasons. It's a little too absent-minded for me. It's maybe a little too spaced out. Chaz's performances on these verses are actually pretty viable. But every time this chorus rolls around, I'm ready to freaking fall asleep, man. This is far from a vibe. Foreplay isn't very good either, sadly. Half-baked, half-thought-out track with absolutely nothing to fall back on. Between this instrumental that sounds very thrown together and Chaz's spoken word performance on this track, which is trying so hard but falling even harder, I'm not into this. I think it's the worst track here. Even the jam that we get at the end of it is just more obnoxious than anything. And when it comes to Deja Vu, you gotta give the guy credit. By this point in the album, it's pretty freaking far out. And on this track, we get endless soloing, endless hazy atmospheres, endless vocals that seem like Chaz is about to fall asleep. There are just tracks on here that I'm not feeling. Now, while not perfect, I think the quality of the good material here is just enough to make this, certainly a viable listen. Not only that, but this is a very intriguing sort of peek behind the curtain into what Chaz can do in these fields. Now you see, Way Too Hot is a really cool late album treat. It's got a lot of the same qualities as the rest of the album, but maybe a little bouncier. But it's also so much catchier, so much more approachable, so much more complete. Not only that, but it's fun, and Chaz seems really comfortable on this track. But then we get Millennium featuring the Matson too, and I wasn't even into their project together. And a lot of the same feelings I had about that album kind of show up on this track. It's certainly funky, and the Matson 2's very old school, sort of analog sounding production, they certainly do it justice. But between the guitar solo and the bouncing beat, this is just a little obnoxious. Just trust me, Chaz has more good ideas than bad ideas on this album, but overall, it's not panning out as perfectly as I wish it would. But out of nowhere, Chaz literally saves the best for last. Days in Love is far beyond one of the best tracks here. Not only that, but this is one of the best neo-psych and psychedelic rock tracks I've heard all year from any band. It's so bright, it's full of life. I love this riff as well. We get some sweet solos, the layered vocals is a really nice touch. This is fantastic. Chaz is a little all over the place on this album. This is a big leap for him, but let me tell you this, the quality is certainly here. There's a lot of really cool, interesting, intriguing ideas that really push neo-psych and psych pop forward a little bit. The soulful performances, the very hazy nature of this album is a lot of really interesting stuff. There's just some tracks on here that I just feel like, could use a little bit more time cooking. Could have used a little bit completion of your thoughts on that track, Chaz. But still, most of this album is fairly interesting. I'm feeling a decent 7. Let me know what you guys think down below. If you like the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.